Welcome to Social Justice Warrior Leadership Training. I'm your moderator today. I'm a sophomore in high school. This is Samantha Joo, the founder of Platform. And this is Kristen, our guest speaker for today.
Hello.
Welcome. How are you?
I'm well.
Today we're going to be talking about strengths. I have a question for you first off.
We're just jumping right in.
What is your social justice passion, or what's something you care about?
Well, it is a long list, but I mean the number one thing, honestly, is teaching social justice to children. And I have my own 12-year-old, and that just drives me. I'm also very passionate about the reentry space because that happens to be where my employer, but I love my job. I work with formerly incarcerated adults that are on either probation or parole and help them find permanent, meaningful work. So I would say those would be the two things. The children, teaching children social justice and getting that kind of message to kids is probably tops the list for me.
That's good. I like the social justice patterns. So since we are talking about strengths and passions and skills in that area, what do you consider to be some of your strengths?
So this is, a great topic. And, when Sam emailed me last week to remind me that this was the topic and gave me the link. And I replied to her with some stuff, and then she replied back with some stuff. And one of the things she made a point of saying, and then it all made sense when I watched the video that we watched, and then comparing it to grit, is that the strength that we're talking about is really our what gives us energy, as opposed to like specific skill sets or things that we are good at. And so, and there is the difference. And so I think when I was like the email I sent to Sam, I think I was describing the grit that I have, which I know is defined in some readings that you guys have done. And so the difference between grit is like something you can do sustainably over time, and you might have passion when you do it to get to an end goal, where strengths are what gives you the energy to move forward. And so for me, when I think of that, think of what energizes me. I have a lot of compassion, and I'm not just going to leave it at, oh, I have compassion, but with that compassion, I build relationships. I have leadership skills. I'm good at community outreach, and teaching, and then management skills. So those would be how I would describe my strengths, which to me all come from my compassion, because you have to have compassion, I believe, in humanity, in society, in the earth, in the world, in order to do those things, in order to lead effectively, in order to have effective outreach, in order to build relationships with others.
Yes.
I'm curious, Kristen, how did you come to know your strengths? And it's not like at the age of 5, you said, "Ooh, let me list the strengths for you." So how do you come to this knowledge that these are your strengths and that these are the very things that gives you energy?
Yeah. I mean, this is a lifelong thing. I'm 51, just had a birthday last week. And if you had asked me this question 10 years ago, I might have thrown the word leadership in there, maybe the relationship builder thing, but I don't know if I would have started with compassion. So for me, it's been a process of looking back at my life and looking back at my career and learning the things that I did really well at. And for me, it took me going back to school when I went and got my social justice and ethics degree at ILIF at the age of 46 or 47, I guess is when I started there. That it took me doing that to really like look back and to see, like I chose to leave a career and then go into it, go get a different degree and do a different type of career. But what I learned during my time of like deconstruction and realizing things about my life was that I'm actually doing something very similar today that I did 10, 20 years ago in my career, because there's the connecting part was that compassion and that relationship building part of it. And I've only come to know these strengths the way I just described them to you in the last 5 years of my life, honestly. So it's been a lifelong kind of process. But I feel very confident in what they are now. I feel like I do know them, especially because of that experience. But I mean, I say that with hesitation because we have somebody like Reagan who's a sophomore in high school here. And I'm not trying to tell you, Reagan, that you got to wait till you're 50 before you figure it out.
God forbid. No, don't discourage her right now.
But yeah, for me, in the strengths that I just described to you, it's been a process over the last 5 years or so of really taking a backwards look towards the future.
Kristen, if you were to ask Reagan, or if you were to help her to discover or to become aware of her strengths, how would you do that? And I'm actually curious in terms of, I want Reagan's input on this too, because I'm wanting to know, like you said, is it something that we could only find out later in life after having life experience? Or is it something you can figure out at a young age?
I think you can figure out at a young age. I mean, if we go with the definition of what gives you energy, what brings you energy, you could do that at any age, right? I could think of my 12-year-old 7th grade son, and we could right now tonight sit down and talk about his strengths and talk about what are the things that give you energy. So start with that, and then go from there. I mean, even if you're talking about skills, you talk about the skills that give you energy, or the activities that you do that give you energy, then you can take each one of those and kind of break it down. Like, okay, this playing video games, thinking of my son, gives him energy. So we can break it down. And what is it about it? He might tell me that he likes to connect with his friends because he does the whole, they talk with each other and they team up, the teamwork. He likes that. I mean, we could start to break down a little more what it is, why it gives him energy. And then we start to find some strengths inside of there.
I'm curious, Reagan, what gives you strength? And do you think, what gives you energy? And do you consider them to be your strengths?
I think one of my strengths, or something that gives me energy, is I think to be outside, and I like to backpack and to go on hikes. So I think that's one of my strengths, to have the endurance to hike those miles to get to the destination. And that also give me energy. And I think I would say I'm learning to be a leader and learning how to be a better leader. And so as I'm doing that, I like to plan events, and I'm in Girl Scouts. So I'm organizing events and being around people that know what they're doing and can teach me how to do better at those. That's what really gives me energy.
I'm going to read a definition for you guys because I have a think tank who's sort of running simultaneous to this. And we talked about strengths, which is we actually realized that we don't know what we're talking about. So what
That's our strength is that realization. Right?
And so we spent 30 minutes going around in circles because we couldn't differentiate between passions, strengths, and skills. So the definition that I came up with, and this is very relevant in how that we need to know this as we do social justice work, is this. Personal strengths are defined as our built-in. This is important as opposed to skills, which are learned. Okay, built-in what? Capacities for particular ways of thinking, feeling, behaving. So feeling would be compassion. It's something built within us, so it comes naturally to us. We have to develop it more in terms of understanding how to concretely show compassion to people. Just because you feel compassion doesn't mean you're effectively using that passion and that strength, right?
Right.
Thinking is people who are good at managing, planning events, organizing. That's thinking. Behaving, I think this is like athleticism, like things that are in our body we are able to do. What she was talking about in terms of hiking, right? The physicality of it. So if it's a built-in capacity, something we're naturally gravitate towards and we're strong in them, as opposed to skills which are learned, like my writing is learned. What else is learned is computer skills are learned. You might be good at it, you might enjoy it, but it's not built in within us. Our analytical abilities might have us be good at computer skills, but we're not born with computer skills. So, having said that, if it's built in within us capacities, doesn't necessarily mean just because we're naturally gravitate towards it, that it will give us energy. Because let's say I'm good at organizing, but for the love of God, every time I try to plan an event, I get burned out and tired and feel miserable in it. Is it because that I'm not good at managing or planning ahead, or is it because that particular organization or that particular project might not be in line with what I really want to do? Maybe organize some different kinds of projects. So this is the question I'm asking you, is this. What he's saying is our built-in capacities, we have to enjoy it. If we don't enjoy it, if it doesn't give us energy, then we shouldn't really be developing it because it'll drain us. Do you agree with that assessment?
I mean, a lot of what you just said coincides with the video that you sent. Marcus Buckingham, is that his name? Okay, is that his quote, the built-in capacity thing, or is this a different resource?
No, it was from, actually, this is interesting. This is from psychology.
Okay.
And remember, this is interesting. People who want to talk about your strengths, who are invested in interviewing for jobs, that's what they want to do. A lot of these stuff, like Marcus Buckingham, a lot of these what's this called? Strength finders. It's all about helping you find strengths so you can do well in your job. Find that promotion. Find that spot where you know you'll be able to shine above others. The definition I have is not from job perspective.
Okay. Yeah.
So
my thought on that, the natural capacity, and then you mentioned you might have a natural capacity to organize, but then it drains you. And so the way he describes it, and I thought it was interesting, is that would be a weakness. Then it's even though you're good at it, it drains you. So therefore it's a weakness. So don't, in most of the time, if that's how you are, there's nothing that's going to change that. It's just that's built in you, right? That's the built-in capacity for you. So then don't spend time trying to focus on that. Spend more time using your strengths to that, so whatever it is, the compassion piece or whatever it might be, that's your strength. Either use that to help you with the organization thing, or just walk away from it. You either figure out how can I use my strength to help my weakness, or do I just walk away from that and just only focus on the strengths, and then finding that you can still get everything accomplished by focusing on your strengths. A good example of weakness that I thought was in that video that I watched was called, one of the people said it's like swimming upstream against a hard current, and it's uncomfortable. It doesn't mean you're not good at it. It doesn't mean you don't know how to do it. It's just not very comfortable. And when I think of that for myself, I used to, my whole career before I do what I do now, was I was in sports medicine. And when I think about that career, the stuff that I remember and love and like gives me energy still to think about it was all the relationship piece, where I would work with these young athletes, these college age athletes, and help them through whatever issue they had, whether it was getting through an injury or getting through a life crisis, or maybe gender identity situation, or just struggling with their motivation to be in school or to be an athlete. The part that I started to not enjoy was the actual taking care of the injuries. I was good at it. I was really good at it. I knew how to do rehab. I knew how to help somebody recover from their knee, but it started to drain me. And I was really, really good at it, but it ended up being, it was a weakness because I wasn't, when you stop having the energy from, you stop getting energy from doing it, I don't think you do as good of a job. Like I'm not as focused on it. I could make a mistake. So this is when I realized I needed to move away from that as a career and into something else. But the parts that I remember and help me define my strengths that I did a few minutes ago was looking back at the parts of that job that I think of with such fondness, and I still get energy thinking about people I helped along the way in the relationship piece of it all. Does that help answer that question a little bit? But you can still be really good at something.
I'm curious because I'm actually wanting Reagan's response to this. Kristen, if your son right now came to you, I'm feeling drained doing math. I'm going to quit it. I forget it. I ain't going to do it. What kind of advice would you give Reagan or your son who is finding certain topics or certain things that they do at school draining, and they prefer to spend all their energy on computer games? Or for Reagan, what do you enjoy the most that's not school related?
That's not school related?
Mm-hmm. What gives you energy that's not school related?
I'd probably say Girl Scouts.
Girl Scouts. Well, there's a lot of good elements in Girl Scouts. But what would you say to that, Kristen? I'm curious.
If Reagan said I'm having a hard time with math, it drains me, or
I'm gonna quit it.
Yeah, I'm gonna quit
because it's not my strength.
There is the element of, okay, if you have a weakness, you either quit it, but then suck it up as part of the, I've come from an athletics background. There's that element of suck it up that,
Yeah, so I'm curious.
Tired, you just keep going. But
what's the but part?
But is that suck it up isn't always going to work. And for some people, they just, doesn't matter if you just can't. And I'm thinking of my son actually right now. I mean, he is not a suck it up kid. So I try to take something that they're good at and relate it to the math. So something that he enjoys and try to somehow incorporate it into what he's doing, whether it's doing it on a computer game version of it, or just an interaction with, he's good at interacting with other people. So then we do the assignment together, we talk about it, and then it becomes more interactive. And so trying to pull some sort of strength that he has, or Reagan that you have, and pull that into that thing that you just hate doing. But it is your math assignment, and unfortunately with our meritocracy society, you probably need to pass math to get into college if that's what you want to do. There's all these things that we have to, the constraints of our society that we end up conforming to, unfortunately, in certain situations. One of my thoughts with my son is like, do I put him in a non-traditional school? And I've talked to him about it, one that doesn't have a lot of homework and is not as many structures, but then he gets upset about that because he thinks about his friends and not being around the current friends that he has. And so it becomes this kind
of. Reagan, I'm curious about you, because we talked about grit. Like you go in there, work hard at it, right? Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't, even if you do hard work. Or do you build upon your strengths, what Marcus was saying, and say, anything that gives me energy, I should work on. Things that drain my energy, maybe I should let it go. What do you think, Reagan? Who is in the right here? The grit part, or let me enjoy my strengths?
I think it requires grit. I'm on the side of grit, to work at your weaknesses and try and build it up. And I think you even have to work at your strengths too to improve.
The balance response, Kristen.
This is just so fascinating for me because, one of the things I do in my current job role is I work with our participants who are either on probation or parole, recently released from custody. And I am trying to help them apply for jobs that they can go out there and, have permanent jobs. We're a temporary transitional program. And I talk to them about these things. I talk to them about what is it that really gives you passion? What is it that makes you happy? It brings you joy, which makes me think of the tidying up. book, but what sparks joy in you? And so, and there's a lot of times with the participants that I work with where grit is what we're talking about. And grit is what we're like, you just got to suck it up. You got to have grit. You got to have perseverance. And then other times it just depends on the person. We could talk, we have more of an opportunity, whether it's because of their life circumstances, whether they have kids or not have kids, and what their living situation is, whether they have good support around their family, that we can maybe move into the more of the what gives you energy, because our goal is for them not just to get a job, but to get a job that they can keep and that they enjoy, because that's what reduces recidivism, returning to jail, is having that connection in society. And so just having another job doesn't always do it, but for some people that's what we end up doing, is like we just talk about the grit. So I do think that there's a place for both.
One thing, there are a few things I actually want to point out. If we don't know our strengths, we are not effective, because that is what we bring. That is our gift that we bring to the table, to society, especially in social justice work where there's a lot of emotional trauma. You want to be able to use your strengths in a way that will energize you. Having said that, one of the things you have to understand is take inventory. Strength is not like a skill list. Like I know how to use Google Mail. It's less tangible. And so you need to, whatever capacity you have to be able to break it down. And that can be expressed into certain skills, which you can develop. Not only that, just because your strength is not valued or used well, let's say in the corporate world, that strength might be better used if you use it for certain projects that you're good at, that you find interesting. You're talking about the human skills, right, Kristen? It might not have been good as a physical therapist, because there's elements of it that you were drained from. So if we take those relational, right, capacity and bring it to a nonprofit world, that you find it to be energizing for you, because you're doing what you believe in. And you're directing it towards a community that you want to work with. And that's where passion is. Passion is the focused energy towards a particular community that you want to work with. And the reason why it's very important that we just don't give up is that you need to try all these different things, because you really don't know where your strength is. And you might have certain strengths that are not good in the math class, but if you bring it into a different context, the analytical skills might actually work for you. You might have great analytical skills, but somehow it doesn't translate well in math. It's not that you're bad in math. It's just your analytical skills are not in tune with that. And so the reason why I think grit works is that sometimes if it's not good in this space, try a different space. You have to work in different situations and see if it works for you. What do I mean? Like, I absolutely hated mentoring, because I would tutor students and I would mentor them to do well in school. And I thought I was just bad at mentoring, which is the reason why I just gave up tutoring and mentoring, because I was miserable at it. But I realized it was not mentoring that I was miserable about. It was trying to help students, inspire them to get good grades, because I didn't believe in good grades. Because it was not the whole picture that I wanted to do. But when I was mentoring people to pursue their potential, know who they are, in the specific and social justice realm, I realized I was energized by it. But I would not have known that if I gave up mentoring altogether. It's trying a different context. So finding your strength is very important, but understanding that that particular context might not be ideal. for you. Does that all that make sense to you, Kristen and Reagan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about things that you're good at and that they just and also how your strengths can change over time too.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when I think back to when I would actually do the physical rehab of injuries, I've always been good at it, but it used to give me energy to do that. And then at some point that element stopped, but I still had the relationship piece that I enjoyed. And so there's something that I've seen strengths that connect throughout my life, and then other ones that kind of ebbed and flowed.
Yeah. I have to say, everything, passions change, our strengths change, because we are always changing as well. Reagan, do you have any final thoughts or questions or comments?
I think that to focus on your strengths and try to improve your weaknesses, and to figure out how to incorporate your weaknesses into your strengths is important.
Actually, can you clarify that for me? What do you mean incorporate weakness? I'm curious.
As you were saying with the math example, with math, it pertains to different parts of your life. You're going to use it, say, when you're grocery shopping, you have to work around that. So using math in different parts of your life, you may still have to encounter your weaknesses when you're doing activities that involve your strengths.
I think that's well put, Reagan, because I think in all of life, we cannot work in spaces which utilizes all our strengths 100%. Wherever space we go into, we'll be doing things that we're not good at and something we need to work on and improve. All spaces at any job, whatever you're doing. So you have to have both. Ideally, you'll be able to use 2 or 3 of your strengths in that space. Want to thank you both. Appreciate you both. And I guess we'll see you all next week.
Thank you so much for having me.